morning. My name is Ray Odell. I'm a battalion chief with the Dallas Fire Department. Today we're going to discuss some of the decisions that need to be made and some of the actions that need to be taken when there's a possibility of a victim in a residential occupancy. Now we're not really going to focus so much on the search patterns, the mechanics of search, the methods of taking a person out of the building. We're going to talk a little bit more today about the strategies and tactics that you might use to facilitate this rescue, particularly with the first-in companies. There's a few variables that we'll discuss here in a couple of minutes that have to do with this. Like most of the emergencies that we have in our job that we encounter, there's not just one right answer or one wrong answer. There are a number of different actions you can take, and there are several that are the right answer. There are a few that are the wrong, so hopefully we'll be able to differentiate between those whenever we're finished here today. Whenever you pull up to a fire, you're lucky if you have 40% of the information that you need. You factor in some excited citizens, traffic, weather, and you're just making it more difficult on yourself. Now, keep in mind, whenever you're doing the critique or you're doing the after-action report, you've got 100% of the information and a static picture that you're up there looking at. And you'll look at it and say, man, I can't believe I missed that. Well, hopefully today we'll be able to help you gather some of that information that you need a little bit more quickly and make a little bit better decision. Now, in addition to this class that we have videotaped here, we're going to augment the lesson with some district field training through some fire simulations where we'll have some dynamic scenarios where you can make decisions, and you can make decisions upon the changes too, with the idea being, with a lot of more experienced people in the room, getting some of their knowledge down to some of the younger members. All right, we'll look at some of the objectives of this lesson today. Rescue strategies and the variables that go along with it, staffing and resources, building construction and how fire travels through that, rescue profiles and the possible location of victims, fire conditions, time of day. Now, staffing and resources it's a big variable in this. When you look at the different areas of town, Engine 8, center of town, lots of resources that they can get to quickly. Companies around them are going to get there pretty quickly. On the other hand, they're a little more densely populated. The chances of having a building with several people in it is a little higher than Engine 9. Engine 9 is out there on the perimeter, and they may have it for a little while. The decisions that they make based on the manpower may be very different than what Engine 8 does. Scene size up and communication, we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail. Tactical rescue decision-making exercises, that's what we're going to cover out in the field. And this will be the bulk of this lesson. And affects the building construction on rescue efforts. You know what the building construction is in your part of town, but what if you're filling in and somewhere else? You need to know how fire travels through that and how it affects your rescue attempts. Essentially, there are three rescue strategies. Remove from the environment, remove the visible victim, then enter, isolate, search. That's a concept that we'll go over in great detail here in a few minutes. Rapid immediate search, go in and get them out. Second, make the environment safer. There are a couple of different strategies that we use. One is defend in place, nursing homes, apartments with interior hallways, buildings of that sort. And cutoff strategies. We use this primarily in apartments. Cut the fire off from one set of apartments to the next, and you can make what might have been rescues into evacuations. And a combination, that's really what we strive for. When we have enough companies, enough manpower on scene, we want a combination attack. Vent for fire, vent for life. These are some things that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. Ventilation along with the fire attack. Rescue profiles, survivability profiling. It's an art of making an educated and informed decision based on what the conditions are. This is a buzzword in the fire service now, and kind of a windy way of saying, does this person or person have a chance? What are the chances? What can I do to improve that chance? And do I have multiple victims? And what are the variables there? Low profile. Example of a low profile might be abandoned homes, abandoned apartments. Remember, there's a difference between abandoned and vacant. An abandoned apartment or an abandoned house means that it's not in use anymore, not in use for what it was designed for. Vacant means there's nobody inside. There's a difference between the two. Now, a prime example of a low profile would be the small vacant house in South Dallas or Oak Cliff, or the warehouse over in 3 District or 4 District. Just remember, keep in mind that these buildings don't set themselves on fire. There's a reason for it. So you need to, as you go through your district, most of the time you're aware of these buildings. You know, children might be playing in them. People may use them as a flop house. Look for signs outside that someone might be living inside of them. Now, you take a little bit more cautious approach to this type of structure in that the house itself or the structure itself may have some dangers to it. It may be holes in floors. The construction may not be up to snuff. The roof might be ready to fall in. So that being the case, before you make your search, you need to have a dedicated RIT team in place and hopefully a water supply. Moderate profile. This is the rescue profile that we encounter more often than not. This is also the one where we get more erroneous information from neighbors than we do in the others. In this type of building, you know that somebody lives here. There may be cars in the driveway, bicycles in the front yard, but you don't know if anybody is home. A lot of times you'll get these 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Neighbors come out and say, hey, I saw somebody leave a while ago. They've been having a party for a while. So I don't know if anybody's in there or not, but I know people have been in there this evening. So you have to make your decision based upon that. It's a little bit more urgent that you get in and make a primary search in this building. It's still important that you get a RIT team together and usually a primary water supply. High profile, highly suspected life hazard. You are pretty sure and almost positive that someone is in this house. The neighbor or family member is saying, I just left, I know they're in there. At this point, everything you do supplements the primary search. Everything. Now, in this case, you may not be able to get a RIT team immediately, may not be able to get a water supply immediately. You can't forego them. You have to do them at some point in the fire. Do them as soon as possible. Urgent profile, a known or confirmed life hazard. There is someone in that building that you have to get out. The actions that you take will determine whether or not they live or die. An example of this might be somebody standing out in the front yard with burns or with burned hair saying, hey, I left my brother in there, I know he's in there, to take immediate action. Vent in or isolate search is a viable tactic in this. That person is probably going to be able to point directly to you where that victim is, and you can make your decisions based upon that. Just like when in a high profile, you may not be able to set a RIT team up immediately or a water supply. You have to take the quick action there immediately and get them out. Something else that's important in this, those of you that are on the rescue crew, on a high and urgent profile in particular, you need to be set up and prepared for a patient that comes out. You don't really need to be down the street sitting on your rescue or walking around. You need to have your medical equipment in the front yard and ready to go. Size ups. We've been beating you to death with trying to get better size ups over the last 3 or 4 years, and I think we're getting there. I'm hearing better size ups out on the radio now, and we'll continue to work on these things through our simulation training and some classes that we have coming along. All right, size up should include address and description of the building. Engine 1 is out 100 Main Street, 2-story pitch roof apartment. It can be as simple as that. If you see things that are important, add those as well. Conditions. We have fire on the alpha side, which incidentally, when you pull up, it's a good thing if you can declare what the alpha side is, particularly if we have a multiple alarm fire. That's one of the problems we've had in the past, in that companies coming in on the second or third alarm are not really sure what's alpha and what's bravo. So that helps tremendously, as well as helping us set up the command post off of the chief's car. All right, what side the fire is on, the amount of fire, the quality of the fire if you can. I get just crazy descriptive here. But what the first or second companies tell me as I'm on my way in, or any other BC or anyone else on the car, it kind of gives us a picture and something to work with before we get there. Any subsequent information you can give us, like there is a rescue, makes a big difference on how we look at it when we pull up. Take or pass command. Don't always pass command. We see that way too much. That's improving a little bit more. But sometimes you need to take command. If you pull up on a one-story frame and the nails are on fire on this thing and it's completely incompatible with life, maybe you need to take command on this. Maybe you need to set this thing up. You pass command whenever you're physically needed. And instructions for the next companies. Bring water. Set up on the Alpha side. Come in with us and do a primary search. Need the truck on the Delta side, truck on the Charlie side. Be a little bit more specific and let those companies know what's going on. Set the fire up. You're thinking strategically. You're not thinking tactically at this point. Let's talk a little bit about thermal imaging cameras. This is something that we've not really used to its full capabilities in the past. These really need to be used on your initial size up. Remember we were talking about that 40% of information that you've got and you need to gather more information? Thermal imager is a way to gather that information quickly and help you to make a little bit quicker and better decision. I see that a little bit more now, people carrying it out on their 360. It can tell you quite a bit about the structure when you're going around it. Now keep in mind when you're looking in windows, it won't look in windows like a pair of eyes. It just strictly finds heat signatures. So if you look at a window, you're just going to see a hot window, a hot square. All right, we're going to look at a couple of frames here with the thermal imager as far as using it for your size up. The Alpha side, looking at it without the imager, you can see that smoke is banked down to about knee or waist high. Not much on the Bravo side. Charlie side boarded up. You see a little bit of smoke sifting out. And the Delta side, you can't even see the building. The smoke is obscuring the building. Now, let's have a look at this same building with a thermal imager. Okay, the Alpha side, you can see heat signature in the very front. Bravo side, nothing, just like on the first one. Charlie side, really not much of anything. And a heat signature on the Delta side. Now, if you're a truck officer, and there's a possibility of someone being inside this building, how is that going to affect the way that you might ventilate to make that area more tenable for the victim? Okay, here's just another picture of this is another picture of the same slide, just a little clearer. Again, you can see the heat signature on the Alpha side. This one shows a little bit more than the first one. This is a little bit further into the fire. And the same way with the Delta side. All right, here's a common problem. Sometimes you get to a building, you can't make it all the way around that building. You get over to the side, trying to do your 360. You have to crawl over a wall, go through razor wire, fight a dog, and go down a 10-foot hill. It's just not possible to do your 360. So initially, you may be working with a 180. You do have to get a 360. It's critical that you do, both for yourself as well as the victim who might be inside. So you remember we were talking about a while ago the instructions to incoming companies? Maybe one of the instructions you need to give is for one of the companies to go around the back and report to you what they have. This will make a difference on how you want to start with this fire and how you want to make your search. Okay, here's the first of your difficult decisions after your size up. Should I extinguish it? Or should I immediately go in and search and rescue? This is the one that's most affected by the variables that we talked about earlier. Building construction, manpower, time of day. Let's look at these two. When might you do extinguishment first? Most of the time, that's going to be the answer. Most of the time in Dallas, with the resources that we have, you can coordinate a fire knockdown as well as an immediate primary search. But again, look at the Let's look at the situation with engine 9. Look at the situation if you have a multiple alarm fire in a certain part of town and you're filling in and you're all alone down there. Think about the decisions you'll have to make then. Usually, extinguishment is the most effective tactic in these situations. You don't know how many victims are in there. You don't know where they might be. There's a large number of victims that you can't get to immediately. Unknown location of fire, you don't know where it's at, or it prevents you from getting in, prevents them from getting out. Immediate search and rescue. It might be best in these situations. Minimal manpower, exact location of the victim is known. Remember the engine 9, they pull up, they got a trailer that's going well involved, and somebody says they're in that room right there. Immediate search and rescue might be your answer. Or extensive fire conditions. By extensive fire conditions, I'm talking about possibly a large building or a large house that you may have a lot of fire that for what you've got is not controllable. However, another part of the house is tenable. That's when you use the concept of enter, isolate, search. We're about to talk about that here in just a minute. Can you get in and get out without the fire threatening more lives, including yours? You're going to have to stay on top of changing fire conditions. Fire condition will change quickly. At least one person has got to be out there watching that. Or will things deteriorate too fast where you can't get in and get them out? Where there is a threat to yourself, there is a threat if there's multiple victims. So this is a decision that's best made by experience, and hopefully we'll be able to work through that with some of the fire sims. Here's another consideration. If the chances of survival are not there for the entire extraction period, you're probably going to have to go with fire control first. It's hard to calculate exactly how long it will take to get somebody out. That being the case, if you don't think that you'll be able to get them out in time, go ahead and go with the fire attack. Okay, coordinated attack. This is what we strive for. Initial line placement. We're looking at a combination of fire attack and ventilation line placement. You know, in a large house, you may have to, or a large building, you may have to put your line between the victims and the fire if you can't get an immediate knockdown. Now, look at the most likely places victims will be found. And this depends, too, on the day or if it's day or night. During the day, there's a good chance they'll be near the fire. Maybe that they actually started the fire or they tried to fight the fire before you were called. At night, sleeping areas, people will use the passive egress that they use day in and day out. Whenever they're in a difficult situation, they're going to go the way that they're used to going. Sleeping areas, and let's add one more. Bathroom areas, particularly if a bathroom is attached to a bedroom. They may be looking for an area of refuge. We found quite a few of them in bathrooms, particularly in tubs covered up with something. All right, primary search. We're going to do a primary search at every single building fire that we go to. Now keep in mind, when we report a primary search, it's reported to the alarm office and it's time-stamped. Now we have recorders in the back of the chief's cars, which will record channel 11. So if a primary search is reported to the command post, now it's going to be accessible for after the fire. 2 times when you don't do a primary search immediately. Number 1, interior environment is incompatible with life. Remember we were talking a while ago about the one-story frame with the nails on fire. Don't do a primary search immediately. Or if the structural integrity of the occupancy is such that it is dangerous. Say, for example, an old abandoned warehouse or an old abandoned house, possibility of collapse, holes in the floor, any number of other hazards. All right, identify and control flow paths. Controlling flow paths is not a new concept. We've been doing that for years now. We just never actually identified it as such. Those of you that have been around for a while remember the advent of the positive pressure fans. And when they came in, I remember I was a rookie, and there was almost a full-scale mutiny of all the truck officers and truck crews in that they thought it was insane to pump fresh air into a building and it would just increase the fire. You know, at one point, an effective strategy, or an accepted strategy, we'll say that, was to go and shell out all of the windows in the house, or shell out several of them to release some of the heat. And it did that. It let the heat out of the building, but also increased the fire. Now, PPV fans are an accepted tool and an effective tool if they're used correctly that we've done for a few years now. Now, Underwriters Laboratories has done some experiments and some studies on some ventilation practices that may challenge what we're doing now. That's not really something that we're going to discuss today, but probably within the next couple of years, we'll start seeing some of those concepts in practice. Okay, you can remember from your fire science classes that heat and smoke go from a higher pressure area to a lower pressure area. This is a flow path. The ideal is to control the flow path and try to reduce the number that we have. If you identify a flow path and it's not the one you want, try to control it by closing doors and windows. And this is where the PPV fan really comes into play. All right, controlling the flow path. Continue to do that after you enter the building. If you can, when you search a room, close the door. Now, remember in RECIO, way back when you were in rookie school, the third part of that is confined. The smaller area you can make the fire, the better. Make that area smaller, force the fire to follow the flow path that you want it to follow. Shutting the door will, not only will it limit fire growth, but it'll cause some, or it will give some areas of refuge for people that might be in there. And this is particularly good if you have multiple victims. Okay, let's look at one of the experiments that Underwriters Laboratory did. Now, this goes right in line with what we were talking about, shutting the area and giving an area of refuge. All right, in this particular fire, this test fire, the fire was down on the first floor of a two-story house. The bedroom that had a closed door got up to about 100 degrees, survivable. Just the heat is survivable. Now, you still may have smoke and carbon monoxide in there, but you know, you've got half of your problem taken care of. An open bedroom upstairs, 450 degrees, shutting the door will bring it down to 150 degrees, make it a more survivable environment. And again, you still have smoke to deal with, but you've knocked your problem out in half. Okay, we're going to talk about a couple of concepts here. Again, these are things that we've done for years. We just haven't really identified them as such. Vent for life. Ventilation to buy time for possible victims goes right along with controlling the flow paths, making the area more tenable for them. Improve conditions for a known life hazard. Early horizontal ventilation along with an aggressive search. Now, primarily we do this with a PPV fan and moving in behind it. Now, vent for fire, essentially it's the same thing, but it helps the attack team move through the house more quickly. Now, one of the things that can do that is vertical ventilation. We think vertical ventilation more along the lines of venting for fire. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about vent, enter, isolate, search. And I'm going to back out of the picture here so you can see this slide. Vent, enter, search is a tried and true tactic that's been used for several years in the fire service. Essentially what it is you'll go into a window, an exterior window, go into a room, search it, and come back out. Now, something else has been added to that, isolate. Isolate goes right along with controlling the flow paths. The one additional thing that you do is you'll go in and you'll close the door to the rest of the house. You won't create another flow path, and you'll create an area of refuge if there is someone in there. Now, a couple of the advantages of vent, enter, search, or vent, enter, isolate search are, number one, you can get in and get out quickly. You can search multiple areas, takes a little bit less manpower, and you can use the thermal imaging camera from the window. Now, remember what we said a while ago about the thermal imager. You can't look through a window. That window's got to be open or broken. You can sweep the room. When your guys go in, you'll have somebody as an anchor point, and it helps them with the orientation of the room. Now, something else to think about, in a house, most houses, not all of them now, the entry door is going to be directly across from the window. So that may give you a little bit of orientation. One thing to be careful about when you're inside is a lot of the bigger houses, you've got great big closets and you've got bathrooms attached. So it's very important that you keep your orientation. It's a little bit higher risk than some of the other operations if the fire is advanced. Remember we talked about earlier, one of the times to do an immediate rescue was when some of the house is tenable and the rest of it is not. So you got to keep aware of changing fire conditions. Even down here on the bottom said even a hollow core wooden door can protect you for a little while. It'll hold a fire for a little while, but not really all that long. Now you're working ahead of the hose line most of the time in this. So again, you got to keep an eye on changing fire conditions. Look at the house as compartments and think of the survivability of each compartment. And this is one of the primary ideas behind vent in or isolate search. And we'll look at that in practice here in a couple of minutes, as well as when we go and do our SIMS training out in the district. All right, we're going to look at a couple of scenarios there. You know, we got a static picture, nothing's really happening on this. Nothing's so easy whenever we go out and do the district. All right, here's another example. Say, for example, you're Engine 9. You're the only company on location. Now we're thinking about some of the variables that we discussed earlier in the lesson. Manpower, time of day, building construction. It's obviously a balloon frame. That's probably going to travel upward. However, the fire is in the upstairs. Are you going to extinguish this thing immediately, or are you going to try to make a search? You got victims inside, not victim, but victims. So you got multiple. So it's going to take a little while to search this thing. You've only got 3 people. It's a great big old house to search. So probably putting the fire out and doing a primary search as you move through might be your best bet. The bottom floor here, you can probably evacuate it. Nobody's alive in this room. It probably ain't good for the person in this room. And its conditions are probably deteriorating down here. This is going to be your key area to search. Will vent in or search be a viable tactic in this? Probably not. The stairs are probably pretty well protected. You know, you get a line between it and any victims, and as soon as the company gets here, as soon as the truck company gets there and starts with ventilation, things are going to get considerably better. All right, here's our last example. What's your size up on this? Other than, oh crap, you got to come up with something a little bit better than that. Engine 1 is out. We've got a 2-story balloon frame with considerable fire on the delta side. My actions are, I'm either going to go in and make a search on the Alpha Bravo side. I'm going to go ahead and make my fire attack on the delta side. There are any number of things that you might do. Okay, engine 1 out, balloon frame, electrical wires going into the fire area, the pertinent information. Somebody's outside, says there's nobody in the building, or there might be somebody in the building. It's going to make a difference on the actions that you take. What you want the next company to do, again, it depends on somebody's in or out of this building. If you think somebody is in, you start setting your companies up. You're taking command here. Passing command may not be your best option. Now you're thinking strategically, you're not thinking tactically. You may set your truck company over on the Alpha Bravo side. You're going to look at these electrical wires, and that's going to make quite a bit of difference. How about somebody doing, it's a big building. You need somebody to help you out with the size up on the backside. That may very well be true. Take you a little while to walk around this thing. What's the best way to protect any occupants that might be there? You're putting the fire out with this thing. Again, good things happen whenever the fire goes out, and this is a prime example of it. But it's going to take a whole lot of wire, a whole lot of water to hit this thing. All right, we're going to go ahead and close this out now. Now, one thing I didn't mention that I should have was the accountability part of this. Whenever you have an urgent situation, an urgent profile, the guys have a tendency to lose their discipline a bit. Accountability is paramount on any of these situations. Now, we'll go ahead and get started hopefully this next month on the fire sims part of this. One thing I would like you guys to do, though, is if you have buildings in your district that you like to train on or you would like simulations done on, you just contact me over at Battalion 4, and I can come over and we'll set those up for you. So anyway, we'll see you out there.